Hey, the space will start in a few minutes. I'm just going to put some resources in the comments, some free PDFs and other things people can use. So just give me a couple seconds. Also, too, this is an open discussion. So anyone who wants a mic, feel free to request one. Just take me a few more seconds to put a few more PDFs in the comments. So I have post-traumatic slave syndrome in the replies, a free PDF of that. I'm also going to put Bell Hooks' book. These were 2 recommendations that were in the comments of that thread. And then I'm also going to post Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery, and then also The Origins of the Family. And if there's any more books that y'all would like on this topic, let me know. I probably have the free PDF of it. So this is Bridgetoe on the mic. How you feeling today? Let me know if y'all can hear me too, because I know Twitter be tripping. Okay, so I have them posted, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into the conversation. Okay, I see someone said that they can hear me, so that's good. So again, it's just an open discussion. It's not like a lecture. So if you feel like you want to express something or explore some ideas or throw some concepts out there, don't hesitate to ask for a mic. What made me want to have this conversation, even though it's been had many times before, is there was a video on the timeline of a parent taking away all the furniture and things within a kid's room, and then it went viral. And it just reminded me of especially I guess in the last 10 years, I can say, with social media and how popular it is, in which we make a spectacle out of punishing children and young people and what that ties to. It reminds me that even before social media, I remember being a kid at school and how the teacher knew they had the power to call a parent, and that parent would try to perform civility so bad that they would beat their kids in front of everybody in a public ritual of humiliation, and then also to show that I'm not that irresponsible parent. I got my kid in line type of thing. And I used to watch as my friends went through this, and of course, as I'm growing into my own politic, in full disclosure, I'm a Pan-African communist. So a lot of these critiques and these observations comes from that perspective. So anyways, I remember watching these things and also these things happening to me. And I used to watch how my parents performed for whiteness and how other people in my community would perform for whiteness and how this was applauded. And of course, as you start reading theory and you read your own history and start learning about yourself, you start seeing the commonalities to chattel slavery and breeding farms. Real quick, I'm gonna take a drink of water. And so at a very young age, because I love to read, so I was reading about this very young, I would look up books of different torture techniques within chattel slavery. And it shocked me how many of it was practiced in my own community with me and my cousins, and that was normal, normalized to the point that we would even laugh at our abuse. And it wasn't abnormal for me to walk into the living room and hear my mom on the phone sharing different beating techniques to get your kid in line. And so it made me think of other things too. And I'm interested to hear what other people thought of, is that, what do they mean by in line? What does it mean to be a good kid in a white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal system, right? When that teacher is wanting to call your parents, what is it usually for? Speaking out without permission, questioning authority. And then it is your parents' role to come and bring you back in line in accordance to the standards of that school system. Well, then what does that mean, right? Like, are we parenting and building autonomous beings that can map out life for themselves? Are we breaking and crushing these kids and these youth in their prime and stifling our own liberation in the process? So that's kind of where I want the conversation to go and some of the ideas for us to explore. So again, anyone who's comfortable, grab a mic. I'm going to say that since we're talking specifically about chattel slavery, and most people on the post were Black, that the mic is going to go to Black people. So I do not want to hear any Snow Roach's opinions on how Black people run their households. That's not what this is for. So this will be a safe space for us, and I will regulate it in that way. So if you're not Black, do not ask for a mic. So I did give a mic to one person. I'm not sure if they can hear me, but 2024, if you wanted to add something before I moved on, feel free.
Yes. I just wanted to add that. Okay, so as somebody who lives in Nigeria, I really don't, have a lot of information about how our parents disciplined us pre-colonialism. But I do know that it wasn't like, whipping, the way they were beaten and basically, the chattel slavery techniques. So I really think that, you know, the discipline methods of our parents, because if you ask any Nigerian child, especially us millennials, there's hardly anyone who wasn't beaten growing up, who, continuously corporal punishment was mainly the only type of discipline, followed by neglect, uh, maltreatment, emotional abuse, and the likes. So I'm really sure it was all an offshoot of what the whites practiced over there, you know, with slavery, and then they imported that also with colonialism. So totally breaking the spirit of the black, the black nation, and I don't think we are over it yet. I myself, being a mom, I try not to beat my son, but I will not lie to you because that's all I saw growing up. It hasn't been easy for me, and I really, really hope. I don't know how, if you don't have these conversations, we really cannot, you identify the triggers and how we can change that behavior, because believe it or not, a lot of Nigerian millennials, when you have these conversations, they all fantasize. If there's one thing a Nigerian millennial or a Nigerian is fantasizing about, it is beating their unborn children. They really cannot wait to bring out the whip and beat their children if they don't misbehave, if they, as a form of discipline. A lot of them don't believe in, recognizing a child as a whole human being and interacting with their spirit as such. It's more of, regurgitating those beliefs that are steeped in colonialism and Christianity. I want to say, because a lot of them really just say, spare the rod and spoil the child. That is always their go-to. They don't always look at it like, oh, the person who brought this idea or who modeled this for you, they don't do that to their kids. You don't see, I don't know, but I know that one of the things most Nigerians also say is that, oh, the white man's kids are spoiled. We don't want our kids to be like them because they don't whip their kids. But we all aspire to go to emigrate to the white man's country and live there. We see their working system and we emulate that. But we really don't desire to have that process or birth that thing that made them be the way they are. We don't want to question ourselves. We just want to, continue to, build on that foundation of a life that does not question what they were handed, what was handed over to us, even as we were not enslaved, we were colonized, but we still cannot break out of that box to determine, our own person, who we truly are. So that's really what I wanted to say.
No, I thank you for that. You brought up so many good points. Like as you were talking, I was just reliving a lot of stuff again that I witnessed and lived through and then observed in society and our communities as a whole. Especially where you hit the point where you said that there's people now, because of our abuse that we suffered at the hands of our parents, are now fantasizing about doing that to kids that haven't even entered the world yet, and that being something that's normal and rarely pushed back on. And what does that mean, right? And how you brought up colonialism and, of course, chattel slavery, and how we become overseers in our own communities. And I only want to call them communities because as we enact these colonial systems, we create sites of domination instead of communities. And then we wonder why things don't get the same, or why things stay the same, why things don't change, and why we can't, better our conditions. I think it is because adapting these systems, like you said, without questioning where they come from, what they're doing to us collectively, is again stifling our own liberation. Let me get the requests right quick. And I see Diamond's hand up. You can go ahead and speak.
Um, Hello to the host and to everyone in the room. This is a very, very great topic that we are discussing. A small background: I am a mom of four, as well as a part-time mom to two goddaughters who lost their mom. But when I was growing up, I was beat with a shoe, whips, switches, purse straps, and I could probably say that I've never whipped my children with any of those things. And my children still maintain respect, tact, dignity. Um, yes, they still act like children. And that's the thing, is that people don't expect children to test us. They're going to test us. Even if you threaten them, even if you whip them, they're going to continue to challenge us. That is what children do. And so what I had done is a lot of research, because I felt that I had been abused when I was being whipped. I wasn't just, spanked like on the bottom. I was, slapped on the face and pushed downstairs, and, I thought just done very wrong. And I didn't feel like I had to do my kids like that. There's a lot of things that were missing in our community, like healthy boundaries, communication, simple things that we can do as parents, even aunts, uncles, whether you're a parent or not. We always talk about this village, but we never allow the village to step in. We just say, okay, get the belt, get the switch, get the shoe, and then proceed to hit our kids. And that is a practice of chattel slavery. And so when Penn had brought up the initial tweet, it brought me back to Dr. Joy DeGroove's book about post-traumatic slave syndrome, that a lot of us have ingrained in us, that we continue to push this post-traumatic generational traumas onto each other and down the generation onto our children. And it's constant. Sometimes it's, what do you call it, like in the back of our mind. It's not even like, it's subliminal. I'm sorry. It's not even like something that we even know what we're doing. We don't have a lot of spaces where we talk to other parents. And then the ones that do talk, sometimes they don't even listen. I had a whole thing with my younger sister where I try to talk to her about things, and I see her act out just like my mother. And I just, tried to get her to listen because her anger was so vivid. And I'm trying to explain to her, hey, I understand your position. Your words are valid, but you can't always act out on your anger. Sometimes you have to humble yourself in your anger. And especially when it comes to your children. We get upset at them, and the first thing we want to do is beat on them. And then, they always say never hit your kids while you're angry. But I've seen parents do that. I've been hit while my parents have been angry, and they beat the shit out of me, probably not just because of what I did, but because they're angry at whatever else is ailing them beyond me. Excuse my language, I'm sorry. Um, so it's very closely tied to chattel slavery. And, my mother will also come in with the Bible and talk to me about, what the Bible says. And it's always the verse of, the Bible says, honor thy mother and father, your days will be short. And it wasn't until I was grown that I had realized the verse extended and said, hey, but parents do not leave your children into provocation. She never ever went off into that little part. It was just that one part where, honor your mother and father. And so, that was crucial to us. We hold a very, very special part of ourselves when we're responsible for children. We've been entrusted with these little people, these little spirits, and even as they grow older, we are responsible for them. And I feel like, they do come from an oppressed position. I talk to my children more than anything, and I talk to them about everything because I feel like hearing it from me versus just some random person in the world will save them more heartache than anything. Yes, I tone it for their ages. My kids are almost grown. Some of them are grown. But I do communicate with them and I allow them to communicate back. I listen to them back and I try to build solutions to whatever that's ailing them. And so that is what we've built is trust and respect. So I don't never have to, threaten to spank or harm or do any of that. You know, they want to do pleasing things just for themselves, not even for me, just for themselves. So um, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'll land right here.
Now, Diamond, I appreciate you for real. You know, first of all, I want to thank everyone who spoke and has given like their personal experience. Thank you. That's not easy to do. None of us should have gone through what we've gone through. And I just want to make that clear. So I want to also say, Diamond, what you brought up about how beating your kids while you're angry, right? And how living in a white settler colony here in the States, and then, of course, the global system of white supremacy. A lot of us who go on our job and have to function within this white supremacist capitalist system, abused and exploited at work, walking down the street and being constantly disrespected and dehumanized, will then take that anger out and bring it into the home and make it a site of domination and take it out on those that are weaker than us. What we see in these patterns is that when people are in a position of privilege, whether it be ableism, whether it be transphobia, homophobia, all of those systems of oppression in which you find privilege, we seek to take it out on those that are most marginalized. And I argue that that's not only counter-revolutionary, but we will never get free until we're all free. So when we see these things, as far as our current events and our material conditions continuously get worse, and we're like, what do we need to do? I would say we need to start within, as far as not only community and destroying these sites of domination wherever they exist. And then from there, we can actually build something sustainable in that world that we all deserve to live in and be liberated. So with that, I want to pass it on to Mama B and then Goddess after that.
Mm, mm. Thank you so much for this conversation, everyone. Whew. You know, I work in the parenting space, and a while back, I think it was on Clubhouse. Yes, it was. I stumbled on a room titled Surviving African and Caribbean Parents. And I walked into that room and I sat there for an hour and a half, and they kept inviting me up to speak, but I didn't want to go up because I think they just assumed that I was one of them. And it was young adults from these countries, immigrants. I think they were in North America, most of them. And they were sharing amongst themselves the pain and their wounds of growing up and surviving or trying to survive, growing up in immigrant homes with parents from Africa and Caribbean. And after an hour and a half, I stepped up on the stage and I opened my mouth and I said, I am your parents. Before that, anyway, I felt so privileged as I was sitting in this space, because it was like I was a fly on the wall listening to my children, because a lot of them could be my children. And it was such a privilege to get an idea of what our children are going through. So when I stepped up on the stage, I said, I am your parents. And the visceral reaction that came out of those young adults, for a moment there, they forgot that we are all strangers. And I could hear, oh, no, 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 oh, no, no, oh, no, 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 no. They were so frightened. And I could hear some other one saying, oh, please don't tell my grandmother, don't tell my grandmother. And I had to say, no, 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 remember, we are all strangers. I don't know you. I just felt that I'm in proxy of your parents. And so we spoke. And of course, I had to fight the impulse to try and explain us parents. I had to fight the impulse to say, oh, when we come to these countries in North America, because that's where I am in North America too, and I raised my son here in North America, right? He was born and raised in North America. So I had to fight the impulse to try to explain that. And I heard in my head, no, 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 no. This is not that space. This is not that time. You are just here to sit and listen to your children. And I sat there and I told them, I said, you know what? I'm listening. I'm here just to listen. And by the end of all of that, it was like, oh, we need to have more of these conversations. And I started to open a room on Clubhouse every Fridays, because initially I had said, oh, open these rooms. Let's talk about this again, open another room. And then after the room, I thought, no, take ownership of this. These are your children. Take ownership of this, and you open a room and hopefully have your peers, the parents, to come into that room and so we can talk and help each other and understand the pain that we are putting our children through. But you know what? After only a few weeks, I had to shelve that room because my people were not coming. My peers were not coming. There were some, people from the other room, the room that initiated or motivated or inspired my room, that I titled the same title, Surviving African and Caribbean Parents. They didn't come. Maybe it wasn't marketed right or the word wasn't spreading. But anyway, so I had to shelve it because it was not a room for the children that I heard talking, the young adults that I heard talking. It was for people like me. It was for the people who are my age, the parents, to come and talk. But they didn't come. So it's been shelved. And at some point, I'm now on Clubhouse. I'm now on Spaces here, and I'm holding rooms every Sunday, talking about this stuff, trying to build a village, a community, to break the cycle of toxic parenting. Because often we call it, you hear, especially in the church, you hear talk about, oh, generational curses, generational. It's not a curse. It's just toxic parenting that can be broken. Because when you call it a curse, it feels defeatist, like it's just a fate thing that we're just gonna fall off. No, it's behavior. We need to change, people. And then you have parents who, when this whole, I was raised like that. I was raised, a child is to be seen and not heard. A child is to be seen and is to be heard. And so embedded in that a child is to be seen and not heard, there's a lot of humiliation. A child is being shamed. And then we wonder why our children struggle with self-esteem issues. And then we do this domestic violence against children. And we want to sanitize it and call it spanking. What just spanking our children? No. An adult beating up on another adult in a home, we call 911 because that was assault that happened in the house. But when that same adult beats up on a child, suddenly we call it good parenting. Why is it that we call it, what we call it depends on the age of the victim? But anyway, I'm just going to end here. I have to say, that whole scripture about spare the rod, I looked it up. That word rod is from the Hebrew word shavat. And shavat, some places call it Shabbat, Shevet or Bet. That was the staff that shepherds used to use when they were shepherding out in the shepherd. That word was used by Solomon. Solomon, being a poet, used that word as in the poetry in Proverbs, use that word to mean that staff that the shepherds carried as they were out in the fields with the sheep. And so they would use the shepherd to point the sheep to the right direction. If the sheep looked like it was falling into a ditch, they used it to just sort of show it the right direction to go back to the flock. It wasn't used to beat up on the sheep. And somehow in the translation over time, that rod that our parents are weaponizing against children is now understood to be as an instrument to beat up on children. That is domestic violence against children. I'm so sorry that I'm so passionate about this, but I am. And I'm just going to end here. So when you hear people talk about spare the rod, push back on that, because we are using it. It has been used to abuse children, and we wonder why our children are struggling. I'm done speaking. Thank you.
No, thank you again. That another amazing submission. And I'm really happy to have you in this space because, like you pointed out, it is very rare to get people, especially older people, in here when we talk about, children and youth and adolescents as an oppressed class and the ways in which we as a community harm and suppress them. Oftentimes, older people don't want to have that conversation, and they definitely don't want to have that system of accountability from people that they look at as lesser, right? So to have you in the space to speak as you did, I really appreciate you being here. Goddess, you're next. And then, I'm sorry, real quick, Goddess. The co-host, did you want to say anything?
No, not for now.
Oh,
Not for now.
okay, cool. No worries. All right, Goddess, go ahead.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everybody. It's been possible. Thank you so much for this space. You already know how I feel about this conversation. I'm a mother of one. He's 5 years old. I have such an interesting background. I was raised by a Pan-Africanist, and then I was raised by like the most traditional Christian woman there is. So in my house, my father never laid a finger, and he was a Pan-Africanist, by the way, believed strongly in never touching a child. So he never hit me. And then my mother was the complete opposite, where she believed strongly in violence being the way to correct and train a child. Let's put into perspective. I was a little girl with ADHD. So I was unruly, out of this world. I, any rules, I was breaking them. I was in my own world. And she did not know what to do with me. That, as a mother now, and I've grown up, we've had our conversations, we've gone to therapy, we've figured our relationship out. But there was something my father always used to say that would make me, I would get confused as to how she was even able to do it. And let's put that into perspective. He told me, so we're Ewe. And Pen Possible, I'm sure you've heard, yeah, you've heard me say this before, but we are Ewe, so it's an ethnic group in West Africa. He said that our ancestors believed, pre-colonial, that children were the center. So children and our elders were the center of the society. And to touch a child, to harm a child, meant you were bringing curses to not only the society, but your lineage. So our ancestors were not touching children. This is very, very new. And it was brought through chattel slavery, and it was brought through colonization. He brings up the fact that these boarding, my parents are old, by the way. This is another thing. My dad is touching 80. In his village, he was there to watch these boarding schools get built and what they brought with these boarding schools. In Canada right now, the Indigenous are fighting because they found their graves. So these Catholics came, took Indigenous people from their homes and put them in these schools and killed them and buried them. And when he was hearing those stories, he's like, that's the same fucking thing they did to us. Like what he was literally seeing the mirroring of what happened on the continent. And he's like, these boarding schools were created for the same purpose. They take us from our families. In these boarding schools, we can't speak our language. We can't practice our religions. So our spirituality is thrown out of it. They give us new names. So he entered Thogwe and was given the name Edward. He wasn't allowed to speak Ewe anymore. He was taught English. And if he spoke Ewe, if he did anything that was inherently Ewe or Ghanaian, they beat the fuck out of them. They beat them. And that is how they used it to train Africans to become colonized. This is how they colonized our brains, in these schools and with the rod. And so if you were elite and you were educated, you would bring these same things into your home. We don't notice how how strategic and intentional our colonizers were. And so if you wanted to carry yourself as an elitist, I'm educated, I am in proximity to whiteness, this is what you would do in your home. You would beat your child, even though this is new to you. And so his parents were like, what the fuck? Like, this is disgusting. My grandparents didn't believe in it. He didn't believe in it. And he would teach me all the time the different ways that our ancestors, our spirituality, how our societies looked before we were colonized. What he saw before he saw colonization slowly take over his village. We are not supposed to be touching these babies. We are not. And I love that when he speaks about it, he says they believe that children have spirits that should light up our society, that should give us hope, should give us faith, should what children and babies are supposed to do for adults, for society, we've completely removed it with capitalism, with colonization. As you can see, the way we dumb down children, we don't respect children, we don't value children. We're destroying our society by doing that. If you ever take time to speak to a child, and when I say speak to a child, not view a child as someone who doesn't have a brain that's not functioning, that can't add to your conversation, that can add to your life. Viewing this little human being as the most brilliant human being and sit there and talk to them, your minds will always be blown. And so you notice, and this is not only, and I can add it the context from what's happening on the continent. I look at education here in North America. So I was born and raised in Canada. You're not allowed, you need to ask before you need to go pee. You're not allowed to talk. The rules and the way that they structure our educational system takes away your critical thinking skills. And this happens on the continent as well. So we already prime children to not think. They can't think for themselves. They're supposed to be obedient. They're supposed to be dependent on authority. Authoritative figures pretty much think for you. Your brain no work. That's what they're telling you. And then you want this human being to then transition into an adult that has critical thinking skills, that will fight for themselves, that will fight for their rights, that will fight for how? We don't realize in how we prime our children, we then create adults that know how that cannot contribute into your society. And I look back at Ghana. If anyone's looking at what's happening in Ghana right now, Ghana's going through it. My country is going through it. And I'm listening to discussions every day. How did we get here? How did we do this? But we don't realize the average Ghanaian adult does not know how to function. Their obsession with authoritative figures. If their pastor says jump, they're going to say how high. Your daddy, even if you're 45 years old, because of how you were primed to have that relationship with your parents, your daddy says jump, you say how high. Your boss says jump, you say how high. Your president is whipping you and saying jump, you're saying how high. And we're trying to figure out why are we not fighting for our rights? They're calling Ghanaians timid. And I'm saying you guys don't even understand. You guys aren't seeing the connections. If we raise these children to partake in our conversations, to value themselves, to be proud of themselves, to know how to have critical thinking skills, would they grow up to be adults to see their leaders harming them in every way and not know how to fight for themselves? Same thing is happening in North America. We're watching it right now in Canada. We're watching it in the US. You're wondering why society, there's two-party systems. Both of them are fucking us over. And our adults don't know what to do. Adults with brains, capable adults, don't know how to function through their society right now. And they're confused. Why? It all starts by how we prime our children. Are we comfortable? Are you as an adult, and I'm speaking to every adult in this space, if there's a child in your vicinity, are you going to give them that child the space to enter your conversation, to be a part of your life as a human being? How do you treat the children in your vicinity? How do you show up for the parents in your vicinity? So let's transition to capitalism makes it even so impossible for parents to be there for their kids. You can't, your teachers are raising your children. Babysitters are raising your children. You don't even know your child. And when your child is there because you're working 9 to 5, you're burnt out when it's time to be with your baby. And so your child is being a child and you're angry. Keep quiet. I need silence. I'm tired. I'm tired. Sit in the corner. Do nothing. I'm saying this all to say, let's it's deeper than colonization. It's deeper than chattel slavery. We live in a society, no matter where in this globe, that has primed you as a capable adult to hate children, to not value children as whole, capable, thinking human beings. And we're harming our future generations and our future societies by doing this. Their brains, there's just so much studies that show that hitting children, even if you yell at them, wires their brain and harms their brain. You're stifling their development if you touch them. You're stifling your development even if you yell at them. And people will argue and people will fight for their right to do just that, to destroy fundamentally the brain of a child. I'm going to end here because I know so many people have so much to say and I'm 10 possible girl, I love what you do, and I love that you are fostering these spaces for unlearning, because there's a lot to unlearn. This is conditioning. This is decades, almost centuries of conditioning. And so when we're having these conversations, a lot of what we're saying right now is so new, it's rare, it's abnormal. Um I'm hoping, open your minds, and don't take anything any of us are saying for grind value. Please, just as Pen Possible always does, take those resources and learn and read for yourself. As I said, I'm going back to listen to the rest of y'all. Thank you so much for this space, Pen Possible, and thanks to the rest of you who are about to educate me and make me a better mother. I appreciate you. Thanks.
No, always. I enjoy sharing space with you, Goddess. And your contribution, of course, like everyone else, I'm just going over in my head so many different examples. Like, especially when you were talking about like how these patterns of domination that we practice on each other show up in our material as far as with politics. And I pose a question to the space, and I'm interested to hear people's like answers and contributions. Is it possible that people who choose to abuse children and repress them in the way that they do so to prevent a society that is too liberated? And what I mean by that is that what happens if we again start centering the most marginalized, that includes children and youth, in our politics and our strategy to build a liberatory society? That means we have to honor their autonomy. So that what happens, you have like a 10-year-old that questions you, an adult, and says, why do you do that way? Why do y'all run the society that way? That doesn't benefit us, that hurts us. And now what happens then, we're like, oh, now they're talking too much. They're talking about change and that we have to change. And again, with all positions of privilege within a power system like settler colonialism that we're all currently experiencing, is that there are people who are comfortable in certain systems of oppression as long as they have certain proximity to power. And that the way in which they approach the most marginalized and repress them is to maintain that system and to not have too much change that jeopardizes their system of comfort. So I guess my question, I'll put it a little short, is that when we think of it from that perspective, then, right? How and which way can we change this? And how can we recognize this as a part of helping and siding with a genocidal state? And I know that might sound extreme, but I want us to map it out a little further, because one of the things I noticed over the years when I would read about this, especially from like academics, is that they will often pose it as, yeah, we need to treat our kids better, but so that they can be better capitalists, so that they can be better citizens, so that they can assimilate more into the white settler project. And I'm saying, what if we instead talk about liberation, and what does that mean if we go down that trajectory, right? So that's what I'm posing to everyone. What are your ideas and thoughts? And the next person, co-host, I'm not sure if you know who is next to speak, because I honestly, I'm not sure. If not, it's okay.
Okoyemi has had her hands up for a while now, so
Okay.
I think she should. Yes, and then if Abusayo.
Hi, can you hear me? Um, Hello. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for this amazing space. This is my first time participating in any space. I will start by saying I am an unlearner. I'm learning to unlearn a lot of things. I'm a millennial also. I'm from Nigeria. I live in the US. I don't have children, at least not yet. And this is one of the reasons. I come from two lethal combination. A society, uh, colonization, and an ultra conservative like Christian background. If I say the Christian tradition I come from, some people here who are from Nigeria who recognize it. But this was when white people exported, anyone who's familiar with the Bill Gothard IBLP kind of Christianity, the one that the Doggers, 19 Kids and Counting, that they live, exported it to some part of Africa, but I'll say particularly Nigeria, and which is like, oh, this is how the structure works. The mother is beneath the father, and then the children are the last. You've seen that umbrella from people who don't know how the rain works or how the umbrella protects, actually. So it was that kind of existence, and children were not, you know, a few people have mentioned it. Children were only meant to be seen. You're not to be heard. I grew up in a household where when your parents are talking to you, you're supposed to be looking at your toes. Looking at them when you're being talked to is a sign of defiance. But so that's how I grew up. And like God has actually said, that kind of upbringing, it stunts your growth, it represses your thinking. Unfortunately for my father specifically, my parents are pastors. Unfortunately for my father, he had a bachelor's degree in English and history. He had all these Shakespeare and history books lying around, but it was mostly about British history and a lot of Shakespeare. So we were not allowed. I was actually like imprisoned mostly. We were not allowed to play with the people in the neighborhood because they were sinners, and we were not mixed with them. We get locked up when my parents are going out. So all I had was my thoughts and these books. You cannot keep children like that without doing anything. So I read books. Like, I'd read the complete works of Shakespeare. By the time I was 10, I'd read the Bible like 15 times. Why I said unfortunately for my dad, reading the Bible over and over again and reading those Shakespeare and all those British literary works, I was like, something is not right here. But I could not say anything to my parents. Like, you say something in defiance, you get slaps, like that you see like stars shining. I grew up to know like that's actually like you having a concussion. So several years ago, after I got into a grad program and I actually started researching. I was fascinated with the issue of women subjugation in African societies. I was particularly interested in Senegal and Nigeria. And I was interested in Senegal because the situation in Senegal, I mean, like Senegal, they have their traditional culture, and then they were colonized by France, and then there's also the Islamic culture and the traditional wall of culture. So there were multiple things at play in Senegal. And then in Nigeria, you hear about all these rebellious women. I was particularly fascinated with one wicked woman called Efunche Tanura. And when people crucified this woman, I'm like, the men doing this stuff, they were doing the same thing too. What's the deal with this woman? Anyway, when I started grad school, that was what I wanted to. I was reading the books that were like, oh, there were these the women in pre-colonial Nigeria were free, they were liberated. I was like, where are these liberated women? Where are their stories? And that was what I came into grad school like to research. And that research journey took a different path, and I ended up on Yoruba orishas, and it was mind blowing, because there is no way you're going to learn about Yoruba orisha without digging into ancient Yoruba culture, and a lot of things started to become clear. I have a dog, a beautiful Kavapuro. I would not, if you hit my dog, I'll kill you first, like, just seriously. So, much less my child. And when I actually came across your page about a couple of months ago, and I read Bell Hooks Sisters of the Yam, and I'm like, yeah, this is what we're saying when we say don't hit your children and all of that. I get told a lot. I've been estranged from my parents, I should put that out there, for like a few years now, especially from my mom, my father, like really recent, for like a year. And it was addressing all this stuff, and the pushback I get is, oh, you think because you're educated now, you have a PhD, like, more than us, like, more than what the scripture says. And it is this same tired trope of misinterpreting the Bible. And I'm like, the same scriptures was okay with enslaving human being, and the same scriptures that says, but anyway, many of you are familiar with how people just take whatever they want from the Bible when it suits them and interpret them however they want. So it is, I guess, what I'm trying to say is, when a lot of us from Nigeria, I think, at least the people that I relate with, there are things there are interconnected factors to this beating of children. I would tell you, based on the research that I've done, even when it comes to like domestic violence and stuff, that people in Nigeria especially do not make connection between what is going on and the slave trade and colonization, because it was so insidious the way it was done, that they were not made, I don't know, the way we were mind robbed and mind conditioned, that the people who did this did it in a way that they were able to extricate themselves from any responsibility from what they did. Because when it comes to like hitting women and children, for example, with the colonial masters, they beat their subjects. And it's like they beat them into submission, because first of all, they don't see them as people. And they, in turn, it's like, to keep your wife in control at home, you need to hit her. They modeled what they were seeing, and mothers also modeled it on their children, and the abuse continues. And it is abhorrent, because especially when it comes to children, because it's like they're the most vulnerable, they are the future. And it is like, when you destroy this future, it is abhorrent as it was strategic, the plan that was put in place, that when they destroy these seeds, these ones that were going to rise in the future to destroy the structures that have been put in place to keep them bound, to keep them from liberation, that when they destroy those ones, then the cycle can continue, the exploitation can continue. And to an extent, I think they keep succeeding. Corporal punishment is still a thing, in Nigeria, like I got hit on the head multiple times when I was going to school in Nigeria. And it wasn't because I was unruly, it was because I was too quiet. And I an experience still would forever stand out in my mind. I was in SS2, which is 11th grade in America, and my class teacher walked in and brought me out. I was like, and called me. I was like, come out here. And the whole class was like, what did she do? And I got hit about 12 times with a cane. And when she was done, she said, you see this one? She's too quiet. It is the quiet ones that are the most deadly. And then dragged me off to the staff room. I was like, this girl is always quiet. The quiet ones are the snake. I have never been unjustly treated ever in my life. Like at that time, I am an introvert, and I had to be forced at that from that moment onward, because I was like, if that is what would spare me being punished, okay, I would start talking. I would start interacting with people. It was years down the line that I found out that I had ASD. That's why I mostly just kept to myself. And so anyway, I would say to recap, this thing in Nigeria, it is a real problem. I'm working on a paper, which to an extent I'm wondering if it's even worth it, because the people that really need to hear this stuff, they are out there on the streets, they are there in the church, they are not at academic conferences. Academic conferences most is like people would like to hear the sound of their own voice and revel in their own achievements, but um I hope it would turn out to be something more public facing that other people can hear. Um, and it's just, what is the way forward to make these discussions we're doing now, like in this space, more accessible to people who really need it? Because like you said, there are people still fantasizing about their children, beating their children, breaking the children's will. It's still being taught from the pulpit in Nigeria. Like, if you don't break their will young, they will grow up and be monsters to you. Teaching people that their children are monsters is just, I don't even have the words. How you can tell people children that they've not seen are monsters. I'll stop there.
I I just want to say real quick, thank you. And everything you went through, I'm so sorry you went through that. You shouldn't have. And the things you brought up, I can't wait to play this space back, y'all, because y'all are really feeding my soul right now. Because, man, I got so many things I want to add, but what I'm going to do is keep my submission very, very short. I love the way you and Goddess brought up pre colonial Africa, right? Because of the way, along with how we were raised and parented and indoctrinated by the system, anti Blackness is a constant indoctrination. And what we're told is that this has always been this way, and that, it's just kids have always been mistreated systemically, and this is just another continuation of that. And we don't really get to study and get in depth and hear from actual people describe, like, actually, no, this is the history and this is what happened. I think that's why it's so important to have spaces like this where it's Black people from across the globe in the diaspora, and also to have younger and older people. So I want to thank you and Goddess for really bringing up the point about pre-colonial times and how we revere children, how it should be and can be again. So, oh, co-host, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Kwemi, for that. Thank you, the pen and paper as well. Yes, I'm just going to add this before giving the mic to Maria Leona. I think she's next to speak, and then Diamond had her hand up, but I can't see her hand up anymore. And then goddess will go after her. In Nigeria, there's also like the hierarchy of, children who are worth, some kind of quality upbringing. I'll put it that way. I'm privileged to work in somewhere where, the education is quite expensive and is worlds apart from like children where schools of like children. So there's that elitism that has also been put into, raising children. Children of the poor have better access to be treated better by their teachers. Now, it's not necessarily, corporal punishment is out of it for children who go to a certain caliber of schools. They're not beaten or touched at all, and then the teachers are forced to actually recognize the children as human beings because their parents are wealthy. And it's not like like the only thing that's different there is like there's no corporal punishment. There's still that yelling at the kids. There's still, treating them like they're not full human beings. And most times, the children are only primed to probably emigrate and live in Western societies where they also cannot question the system. So it's just like the whole thing is teaching children to be invincible, not to be who they are. You're taught to just blend in and not question authority. So I just wanted to add that. So Mary Leona, you can go next. And then before Busaya has a hand up. So but Mary Leona, yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. Good evening. So I just to preface, I really like what everyone has said, and they're all very important. I've I live in Nigeria and I grew up here, and I had a single mother who, at first, sometimes she would be very mad. She would throw me across the room, or she would say hurtful things. Eventually, she stopped because like she started like reading about how to be a better parent and how to improve. But the issue was what she was reading, right? And it was a lot of these books written by these white writers, right? With titles like Your Child is Not Your Friend, or How to Talk to My Daughter About XYZ, or how to deal with or something like how to break the spirit of a strong-willed child. Those kind of very, if you look at it from outside, those kind of very bizarre titles. Like, why would you want to break your child's spirit? Why not, channel it somewhere else and help them? If you think is harmful, how they are stronghold, why not, channel it somewhere else and work on it with them? And like, I sometimes I would, like, when I was younger, I would listen to my mom. I would say, Mommy, tell me how it was when you were my age, how it was when you were younger, just so I could have an idea. I was just curious. I really like my mom, just to have an idea of what she went through. And it was, I just, I could, it was good, I would say. But like, and then I would listen to ask my friends like, oh, what did you do, and how do your parents, react to it? And you hear stories of, oh, I went to school, I spoke to a boy. My mom, the next thing my mom did was she took me to a doctor to check if I was still a virgin. Or I one time somebody called me by accident. I think it was nighttime. And next thing I know, my phone was snatched out of my hand and it was broken into two. And my mom opened the door and said, "Run out of this house because I'm coming after you." And there were just bouts of very bad abuse. Sometimes just, and at times where she was actually like a very good person, and she would try to improve and ask me, or tell me what you don't like about me, and then she would change, and things like that. And like, what I've noticed, like, as a theme in my own life and that of my friends, and especially people around my age, I'm a Gen Zer, is that there's a sense of like, parents, they act like they own you, sort of, which I believe very much so relates to this chattel slavery part. Like, they act like they own you, like they are the end all and be all. You can't think thoughts that are contrary to what they believe. You can't dress how it's even worse when they are Christians, right? You can't believe what's contrary to what they believe. You can't talk about things that are contrary to what they believe. Or it's like you are in a state of, you and them really are in a state of, like, I don't know how to pronounce this word, fugu, or I don't know how to pronounce the word, but you're just in a, your brain is clouded, like you can't do anything. Can't, like, you're watching yourself living life because you have been put in a cupboard, you know. And eventually, as I grew up, I began to like stand up for myself. And then one time I told my mom, I said, when I don't do what you like, or I say I'm not going to church, or I'm not going to, things like, because I've been to uni, I'm just graduated, and things like that. And I said, you act like you're sulking because I said, and if I let you, even you, for example, it's like, oh, if you say you're not going to do XYZ, oh, I'm not going to beat you, but no more money, no more support, no more this. I'm like, okay, well, just beat me. Let's know that that's what you're actually doing, actual violence. And like, it's a case of like there's a lot of ownership, a lot of control. And then when you ask, like, oh, why are you doing this to me? It's like, no, I'm not doing anything to you, just helping you. God said I should train you. God puts you in my hands. And God sent you to me and gave me the manual of how to raise you, the Bible. And it's like, oh, should I hate you or should I hate God? Like, what's going on? Like, who gave the order? Who can I tell this to stop? And like this, like a lot of the practices are they're very violent. You wonder, oh, a child slammed the door. Why is the next best thing to do to unscrew the door, take away their privacy? Hello, that doesn't make any sense. Or they play secular music through their phone, you smash the phone, or you are acting violent, you're acting like you need to be under lock and key, that sort of thing. Of course, I don't believe that prison should exist, but but like, for lack of a better term, like you're acting like a dangerous person. You're acting in a way that if a stranger did this to me, I am within my rights to fight back, but now I can't fight back because I know you won. So if I were to fight back, I would be out on the streets. Like, it's so awful. And I look at parenting practices in my cousins who are older than I am, like they are like in their early 40s. And one of my cousins, she takes very good care to not do all those awful things. Like asking the child questions, what's going on? Like, is seeing the child as a person. I'm not raising a child. I'm raising a person who will become an adult, who will become. So, and that's what is really missing. You don't see them as people who will ever be, who will ever be liberated. You think they're your slaves, really. There's nothing you can't ask them to do. I have friends who, their parents will say, oh, give me 50,000 naira. Give me this. And he's wondering, where should I pluck the money from? Or and the child gives them, because, like, this is my mom, I want to support. This is my dad, I want to support. And oh, please, can I have my money back? Oh, didn't I give you a roof? Didn't I give you food? Do all those things cost that money? Like, teach, like, practice what you say you're teaching. That sort of thing is very interesting and is very sad. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. And I'm very glad that we got to hear from someone younger, because oftentimes there's not a lot of space for you to be heard. And I'm glad you shared with us what you did. And you reminded me of me, like when I was younger, is like how we turn pain into like jokes. Like, and I couldn't help but like hear myself. And it's just like, damn, the things that we do to survive and adapt. But it kind of ties back to, I was going to say, you brought up something where I forgot, but you know what? I'll remember in a little bit. There's been a speaker, according to my screen, that's been here for a while, named hashtag Anon. I don't know if they still want to speak, but they were here like during, I think, earlier. So if you want to speak, you can now.
Yep, I do. Good evening, everyone. So, I'm going to start off as answering the question that the host brought up. She made mention of how liberation for Black people is meant to begin. Well, my submission on that is the fact that we should start from our minds. Do you understand? We start from the way we think about everything, information that we come across. Yeah, I'm actually reading from points I was making, so I may be a little, shaky as I talk. Yeah. So moving on. I'm looking at, something I put down. Yeah, I made some lyrics. They are titled "Beware of the BSIT." Now the B in that acronym is beating. The S is shouting at. The I is insulting, and the T is transference of aggression. So if you have the time, anyone present, please do make that search on Twitter. To make the search, you go into the Twitter search field and then you know write out my handle and then keep a space, then write out raise the kids. Now in those lyrics, I'm talking about everything concerning this particular topic. Begin from slavery being the founding father, yeah, of abuse in the black race. And to go on, let me look at this. Yes. So anything those lyrics are going to teach you are the same things I'm like pretty much teaching Nigerians. So in the because we are not that different, at least the two of us, that's like Black Americans and Nigerians. So anything that is going to work for Black Americans is definitely going to work for Nigerians. And so I made those lyrics in a way that is in plain English. You guys just go through it. Everything is in simple English. You do your back and forth, how it helps, how it's not helping. But I believe it's more aimed at helping. So it's actually going to help. So just go through it, take the time. Yeah.
Okay.
And then,
So real quick, I have a question. So I
okay.
heard you say something about lyrics. So I guess you're telling everyone to check out something on your page that refers to this
Yes.
topic. Do you have a
Yes.
contribution to directly what's been said today? Like, for instance, um, how do you see the way in which we treat children as tying to the carceral state at large? And then where do you stand on prison abolition from that aspect?
Well, it's I would say that the way we treat black children is not healthy. It has never been. In fact, everything that ever came from slavery has never been good for the people who were enslaved. So now, as for prison systems, that one is a bit more tricky because I promise you, if you take away the fact that there are some people that are there for the wrong things that they did not actually do, you would have to also leave room for those who actually do wrong things and then need a place to go for like rehabilitation. And this is not just about black people, this is about any kind of human being that is out there. Do you understand? So, in that, I believe,
So can I interject here?
okay,
Because you brought up something, of course, that I disagree with, but I think we can have the conversation, and then I'm going to make sure we keep centering on the topic at hand as well. So the reason why I asked, right, is
yeah,
because when we go real quick, if you can mute, the reason why I asked is because the way in which we treat children, right, if we understand that it ties to slavery, that our role as parents under white supremacist capitalist system is meant as overseer and oppressor, so that means that our techniques have to produce a certain type of unmaking of a human being so that the state can fill it with this indoctrination and use it for its purposes, whether it be for cannon fodder for war and imperialism, or just to be a cog in the wheel and another being exploited as chattel, right? So if we see that that's the cause, right, and we see that prisons, especially in America and the way they're designed, is to imprison those who rebel against that system and also imprison those that are too poor to afford not to be in that system, right? We look at that in America, the majority of people who are locked up are there for nonviolent offenses that have to do with economic circumstances and environment and living in an anti-Black system. Most predators, most abusers are not seeing prison, according to their own stats. If you want to find the predator, it's probably going to be at the altar, at the school as a coach, and as at your Thanksgiving dinner because your family decided to turn the other cheek because we embrace rape culture. So when we think of it in that way, right, and we see that, damn, the way in which we are raising our kids, we're indoctrinating them in the way of the state. And what I mean by that is that in order to have a prison industrial complex, the system has to tell you what is right and what is wrong, right? The state holds a monopoly on power to decide what morality is. And immorality is being poor. So it is wrong and your fault for being poor. It is you who fell out of God's grace, if we want to use religious indoctrination and just plain old capitalist indoctrination, you were lazy and all kind of ableist terms they use to dispose of you and justify it, right? And then we see that, okay, well, in order for that system to happen, in order for there to be CEOs, in order for there to be judges and lawyers, there has to be kids raised in order to take those positions. So then we have to punish them for what the state teaches us is right and wrong. So it's wrong to speak against authority. It's wrong to challenge that. And we beat that into our kids and along with the entire indoctrination of anti-Blackness so that they can perform it and take their position within empire, right? So that would mean like the pipeline that we hear about the school to prison is actually the home and then school and then prison pipeline that we're actually feeding our kids to an omnicidal system. And looking at it that way, then me, right, my politic is that I was sent to the most marginalized, which in this case, we're talking about children as an oppressed class and adolescents as an oppressed class, right? And I would see, well, damn, if there is a deliberate strategy to create a pipeline to push our children into prisons, well, then I have to destroy that prison industrial complex, not break that child or fill it with faux positivity to ignore the system at hand. We would actually have to structure the way in which we build communities, societies, and treat each other in order to dismantle the system as our community so we can dismantle the system as a whole globally. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the hands because I think the conversation has been enlightening from a lot of people that have contributed. I understand you have maybe a difference of opinion, but what I'm going to encourage you to do is you have an opportunity to sit in a space with a lot of bright, expansive, revolutionary mindsets. A lot of contributions I've heard so far. I can't wait to play it back and get more because I know I missed something. So I'm going to encourage you to go down to the listeners and go ahead and learn and listen while the others speak. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go to the hands. And I want to say the next person was, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Ifa, you can go next.
Peace and greetings, everyone. My name is pronounced Ifa Busiayo, and I wanted my contribution to be an excerpt from the Willie Lynch letter, The Making of a Slave. I felt the need, I wasn't planning on this to be my contribution, but I was led to make this my contribution. And so there is a portion in his letter. This was a speech that he actually made.
Excuse me, real quick, and I apologize for interrupting. But are we aware? I just want to make it aware for the space in the recording. So the Willie Lynch letter, we understand that that's not like real, like a historical document. If that's not the case, but I had to make that apparent. Like it's more like what's the word? Allegory. Like it was made by a Black studies professor to just kind of paint out in a way to describe systems and the way, plantations were organized, but doesn't directly come from a guy named Willie Lynch. And that letter is not written back in the day. It was written in like 1998 or 92 or so by a professor who was just trying to explain in a kind of like a fable kind of way, from a first person character kind of way. Like these are some of the systems that exist and why. And I just wanted to give that pretext. But if you want to continue reading, feel free. But just wanted to make that fact plain.
Okay, well, I'm actually, you know what? I need to unpack that. So I'm going to do more research because I was under the impression that it was a speech given And so I am going to dive more into that. So, yes, thank you for that.
It's all good. I mean, and even in the points of that letter, right, where it talks about, dividing the old and the young, the dark
Right.
and light skin, those things are reality. That they're actual books. And you know what? I'm I have to turn them into PDFs, but I'm going to work on getting those into PDFs and I'll DM them to you. But there are books written by not only Black historians, but other historians that study that system, that detail these systems and from actual fact and record. Because the thing about these old fays, right? These old fays were so sick in colonialism and slavery globally is that they kept detailed records of the way in which they would break and unmake a human being,
Yeah.
like dead ass, to where you can actually point to those as examples. But no, I'm gonna get them to you. I have about 5 books, and
Yeah,
I can. Yeah,
please do,
I
because
got
the
you.
breaking process of the African woman and that brought up, it just, to me, personally, when it comes to how we engage with children, I know in my personal experience, being a woman of color that was raised in the South, I experienced that in my just I could see that in my family system and how it was used psychologically to control me, because I was viewed as someone that was very resistant, or I would ask questions. Why are we doing this? Why are you doing that? And that being viewed as a means of, because one of the, specifically when it states that if she shows any sign of resistance and submitting completely to your will, do not hesitate to use the bullwhip on her to extract the last bit of resistance out of her. And not even physically did it hurt me, but it was that, let me see how I can verbally take that will out of you, rob you of your curiosity. And robbing a child of their curiosity, as an educator, it is it's like you take the light out of their eyes, because in that moment, you don't have the need to ask questions, which was always in some way perverted as you're challenging my authority. When someone, unfortunately, the will of the female, the matriarchs in the family, because they were violently abused by their male counterparts, either physically, emotionally, or mentally, which I experienced in my family system. And they were attempting to find whatever authority they had, and they would use that towards the children, which would be, let me verbally abuse you, let me psychologically warp your own authority. And it's in me being in this space today, I was writing, and I kept writing, and I was documenting, just putting some words out. And what would come out was, I am my own. I am my own. I can't, I am my own. To come from to go through life and cycles of life and know that you have been birthed in your own agency. And in each moment as a child, you are at war with your agency, with your authority figures. And it started with the woman. And not even when you came out of the womb, this was even coded in you in some way. You could feel when your mother's will was being challenged, her agency was being challenged. And finding some type of, how do I establish my identity when my resistance of what was given to me from a higher power naturally is always seeking to be robbed, and how that's connected to this system that you may say, I'm not I don't like Anglo-Saxons. I'm not someone that, I've heard my matriarchs in my family say that specifically. I do not like white people. But then as you're governing, as your authority is saying otherwise. So there are other speakers. I am going to go into research. Thank you, the pen and paper, for that. I am I'm thankful for everyone that spoke in the space earlier and shared their personal experiences. And I'm done speaking.
And you did amazing. Like, basically, you described so well the ways in which on the plantation social constructs of today that we fight so hard to uphold were beaten into our people. So for us to uphold those same social constructs today is capitulating to the white hegemony that oppresses us all globally. I really loved your contribution and appreciated it, for real. Um, the next speaker, I'm honestly not sure. We'll go with Goddess, and then after Goddess, Diamond, and then Shahid.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you, pen and paper. And thank you for everyone that's spoken before. I'm in such an empowered state right now. I was going to touch on Opeyemi's contribution on religion and its relationship and how it's such a huge tool that our colonizers used, which is destroying the Black community and destroying the continent, because that's the tool that's used to uphold so many different ways of marginalizing so many people, and that includes children. Um, it's sad how the Bible does a hierarchy. And it's not just the Bible, the Abrahamic God does it throughout all its religions, but what authority does, how it's bastardized through that. And so children being at the bottom of this hierarchy face the brunt of too much. It's really sad. And then I was in that space, and Ifa Busayo, wow, I hope I said your name well, um, brought me into a space where there's this play I'm writing right now about power, and you touched on it. What the lack of autonomy does to humanity and our relationships with each other. And so when you don't have agency, what you do with power any chance you get it, and how we chase after power for that reason, because in every agency, in every space that you're supposed to have it, it's taken from you because of the state, your parents, your teacher, whoever the fuck is in authority, what they do to oh my good, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that, because we see it on the continent. We see it back home with our relationships with our mothers. And this is why I don't infantilize women. This is another reason, as a feminist, I do not infantilize women, because the minute we get power, what do we do with it? How many children are harmed because of the way we decide to be powerful in our homes? It's thank you so much for touching on that. Thank you. And I'm going to go back to listening to y'all, but I want us to really interrogate our relationship with religion. I think Black folks really need to start interrogating our religion with this God, this relationship with this God, and start looking into how it plays into society, into your families, into your homes. How harmful it is, to be very honest, and how it plays in our lives. And if you're a woman, especially a Black person especially, we really need to interrogate our relationships with these religions. And thank y'all.
No, I appreciate that. And like you brought up, as I was listening to her, and what you just said too, it just reminds me of the ways in which we take up or deputize ourselves to become the police of our community in order to instill white supremacist patriarchy in our communities, right? And we're living the consequences of that. So I loved how you touched on that and you explained it so well and so vividly, for real. I co-sign everything God has said. You did amazing. I think the next person was Diamond, and I believe I see Say Say up here, so I think they should go before Shahid and then Shahid.
I'm gonna yield my mic for a second, if that's okay, Sister Ben.
Oh no, you
Thank
good? It's all good. Go ahead, Say, and then Shahid.
Okay, hi everyone. Peace. Thanks so much for having me. And like everyone else said, everything here has been so eye-opening. And I want to try to speak without being emotional because this really hits home for me. But just to kind of piggyback off of what everyone else has already said, especially the religious aspect, because as Obayemi said, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, but as a Black person who grew up in the deep South, especially with my parents are children of the 60s. So they came about when change was really happening for Black people, and it really affected them mentally. My mom, especially, because she's a very dark skinned woman. And so it wasn't until I got older that I realized how much trauma she had um, connected to skin color and her upbringing. She grew up in a Pentecostal church. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's, women can't wear pants, they can't cut their hair, they can't just everything. So everything was always very much so like connected to you have to beat your children so that the white people don't get them, or you have to beat them down and beat them into submission so they don't go to prison, and it's like when I got older and I started just really examining just even my own peers and the way things were going, I realized like that beating is clearly not helping, because I had so many peers who were still getting caught up in the legal system or getting caught up in drugs or becoming teenage parents. And it's like, well, clearly this religion and this beating isn't helping. But the struggle that I have now, I was estranged from both my parents. I've recently started rebuilding the relationship with my father, but I have not spoken to my mother in a while. And not because I don't want to, but because she just refuses to grow out of that mentality. And now I have two daughters myself. And I've seen her kind of implementing that same thing on my daughters as she did to me. And I just could not allow that. And so I try to, as I think it was Millie, I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce your name, but she spoke about looking at your children as not as slaves, but I try to look at my children as autonomous individuals. Like they're not here to serve me, or they're not here to live out something that I didn't get to do as a child or a teenager. Like they're here to live their own lives, and I try to give them a voice to let them speak. If there's something that you want to say to me, you can say it without feeling like I'm going to retaliate against you or beat you. I don't look at it as defiance. If you say to me, "Mommy, I didn't appreciate that you said this or that you did this to me," that's fine. I don't encroach on their privacy. I try not to treat them that way because I grew up like that. This is my house. Don't close the door. Don't slam the door. Don't do this. Don't do that. But yeah, I can see there's a huge connection between that, excuse me, and colonialism, oppression. And when you are a child of parents who grew up during Jim Crow, and they were taught to be submissive because everything was about staying safe and being protected from being brutalized by racism or oppression. So everything they did in their lives was always about surviving in a racist system. And that's what they then imparted on us. And so I'm like, I just cannot have my children growing up that way. But yeah, that was pretty much what I wanted to say, because when you all touched on that, I was like, well, ding, 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 that's exactly what I've been trying to fight against. And I've been trying to unlearn those behaviors with my own children. And I sit them down sometimes and I talk to them and I say, listen, I'm not perfect. I'm sorry. But if there's anything that I'm doing that you feel that is wrong to you, please speak up. I will never hold that against you. But All right, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
I appreciate everything you said and all the work that you're doing, especially with everything that you went through, and to choose liberation for your own children. Dope. And I'm glad you shared that with us. Thank you. I do want to add something because you have brought up about like, the way you approach autonomy when it comes to your children. And I just like started smiling because I was like, I love when I hear kids and children, young people having their life, people who remind them of their autonomy, because it also shows them how others are supposed to treat them. Because another part of this, way in which we beat and hurt and abuse and break the will of children is that we make them already primed and prepped to go into a rape culture in which they then get preyed upon by every freaking predator out there. And it breaks my heart because we normalize it by them growing up with it at home. And then so when they get out there, they think that that's normal too. And then we wonder why people are having problems with connection, problems developing emotional intelligence, and how we have people so susceptible to reactionary propaganda that they will co-sign a genocidal, omnicidal, ecocidal system. It all ties in together. And I'm so glad that you brought that up and said everything you said. Shahid, go ahead.
Peace. Thank you to pen and paper and everybody in the room that been sharing their experience or their point of view. Um, this topic hit home for me too. Like probably like most people in here, I was beat up a lot growing up by my mom, my dad, my aunties, uncles. Everybody grew up fighting a lot with my cousins and them for real. And I thought about this as everybody was speaking. A lot of thoughts came to my mind, and the one thing that came to my mind was I was always labeled a bad kid and unruly and stuff like that. And I realized, like, or I was thinking as I was as hearing different people say, what they were saying, that I just was a curious young kid. Like I just naturally just was curious and was always able to speak up for myself and stuff like that. And I just kind of like had a small sense of autonomy within myself. But everybody around me, they couldn't understand that because one thing that I actually wrote it down as a couple people mentioned it, and it really hit home. A child is to be seen, not heard. And it was like I was always so outspoken, but like that was so rare because we wasn't supposed to talk, literally. And they would tell me this, like they would beat me, they would tell me however which way, but they would always make it clear. You're not supposed to talk. You're a kid. You get what I'm saying? But in my own eyes, at whatever ages, I probably remember clearly as far back as being like 7 years old. I just remember that I always like I'm not a kid. Like in my head, I thought I was grown. Like I felt like entitled to speak to them, to the adults and stuff like that. But that wasn't encouraged. In fact, it was discouraged, and I get beaten up. I was beaten up a lot my whole life. I was beaten up in all type of different ways with belts and shit. I remember one time I got in trouble. They threw me in the shower, get naked, threw me in the shower, got wet, and then they beat me after the you mean the John beat with all type of shit, you feel me? But um yeah, what I thought about also was pre-colonial Africa. And I don't have to. I want to be open. I don't have any kids. First and foremost, I want to say that I don't have any kids. So I don't. Anything that I say, please understand that I don't have kids. So I don't understand that perspective fully of like having to take care of another person. Um, but in pre-colonial Black Africa, also another thought that came to me as different people were speaking. Um, I read this book, Pre-Colonial Black Africa by Cheek Anti-Diop. It's the only book that I read really that I could recall. That is the only thing that I really know of that I'm going off of about pre-colonial Black Africa and like how our practices was. But in that book, it mentions a little bit. Somebody had mentioned that, I forget who it was, but in that book, it mentions how the way that the society was very communal in Africa before colonialism. So the kids was all together with the kids, and like basically like it was from what I remember is like the way they would structure the society. The kids had a kind of a sense of autonomy in the sense of like they were amongst themselves. They did have, of course, the guidance of like the adults or whatever, but they had like a more of a sense of building community amongst themselves. And I think I say that to say, I think that's where we should be moving forward. pen and paper often talks about kids and their autonomy, and that's a concept that I never thought of in my entire life. And a- as per the topic, I think that's where we need to go. We need to understand that kids are autonomous. I think a lot of us, a few people have mentioned, we got to unlearn. I'm in the process of unlearning a lot of shit myself, and it's a constant, you know, I gotta constantly be reminding myself to like unlearn and relearn new ways of how I deal with everything. But I think autonomy for the kids is like that's the next logical step as far as us as parents. And like I said, I don't have kids, so please understand that my perspective is very narrow in this that I'm speaking. But basically, the kids need to have that autonomy because when I think of the young me, I probably would have been a much better person had they had encouraged me or had they had talked to me like I was like I was a human being instead of talking to me like I'm a pet or something. And another thing that came to mind was the book, um, The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child. Um, in that by Amos Wilson, rest in power, Amos Wilson. In that book, Amos Wilson gives various information and example of how kids are actually a lot more intelligent than what we give them credit as adults. You know, in a general sense, how we raise them and stuff like that. He talks about how like kids are so brilliant at like the age of 3. At the age of 3, you could already start talking to a kid kind of like the same format how we talk to an adult, but instead we're taught like we got to talk to kids like they less than or like like no, I think that, in just my opinion, I think that we should be able to talk to kids like with that sense of like, no, they have their own brain. They can think for themselves, and all we should do is like give them more ammunition for them to keep being a deeper critical thinker. Another thing that I also thought about was religion. And I want to be as brief as possible as this. I want to be open. I'm anti religion. I think that religion is one of the worst things that has happened to our African people all over the globe. So I want to keep this very brief because I could extend myself when it comes to religion. But I think religion pertains greatly to this topic um, because all the Abrahamic religions is all you know tied to slavery somehow. So basically like the way that these religions speak is very violent and it's very like oppressive. So we come up under that same type of like guidance of like you have to do this because you have to, or and then they put this fear in us. And it's like I don't think human beings was born to have fear. Like we supposed to be fearless. I don't know what freedom is, but I could imagine that freedom has something to do with fearlessness. And we are raised the complete opposite. We're raised with this fear, like, oh, you got to do this, or you mean, and then a lot of that different the Bible and the Quran and different books and stuff like that, they're very strict. And I also think as Africans especially, we're very creative people. So that strictness of trying to like reduce certain things or and like categorize things in a box or this and the third, it just limits our creativity, our imagination. And I think that's also a bad practice that as parents that's how we're raising kids or whatever. And I will encourage all my people in the space and all my Africans worldwide to really really, and somebody already said this, I forget who, but I just want to like piggyback off of that as well. I encourage all my African people worldwide to like really look at their relationship with religion, you know um especially if your religion is Abrahamic, because I think that a big part of like this violence, how we are raised up, and like this limiting of our imagination and of our thoughts that we're raised with, and and basically yeah, just that it has to do with religion. A lot of the, the restrictions and stuff like that is religion. And the last thing that I wanted to say is the kids are the future. Pen and Paper has said this. I'm quoting her specifically when I say this. The liberation is the future. The kids are the future. They're the ones that's basically going to liberate us because they're not fully indoctrinated into the things that we are already fully indoctrinated, or our parents or our grandparents and so on and so forth. You know, when we have this violent way of raising our kids and stuff like that, that's when we start little by little taking that away from them. But they are the future liberators. They are the future great, concept creators, and every creator, you mean, is dumb. So it's critical that we give the kids autonomy, that we don't beat them up physically and stuff like that, and that we encourage them to think deeper and stuff like that, and to have conversations with them. I try to practice this myself with the youngest in my own family. Like, I talk to them, I try to talk to them like no, like, you can talk, like, you can formulate your own thought, and I try to like be real equitable with them, like, meaning, like, I try to not be how they was with me. Like, no, like, you can speak your mind, and I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to tell you like you got to do this because I'm older than you. And no, like, speak your mind. I'm gonna give you my perspective and stuff like that to the best of my capability that I can. But I really do think that the kids are the future, and they got to be free. And I'm learning more and more as I'm decolonizing that they really are an oppressed class, and that in order for all of us to be free, the kids got to be free for sure. And yeah, I hate how violent, most of us is raised up. And yeah, I think that's everything that I got to say. Once again, thank you to everybody in the room.
Nah, thank you. I wanted to say real quick before I forget, because as you were speaking towards the end, like my position on children and young people as an oppressed class, right, is that when we challenge these things in which we've been taught to suppress our own liberation through the unmaking of our own children, and then so that they could be assimilated into a white supremacist society and take the reins of overseers and over oppressors of other people's kids and other people, even in the prisons, school systems, all that shit, where their aspirations become being a black face in high place. To me, having these type of conversations and centering children in our decolonial process, and so that instead of becoming like, the trained comprador class or counter-revolutionary, they can actually pick up on a revolutionary process that, because again, a revolution isn't an event, right? It is a process. So you have to have a community that creates a tradition that is rooted in liberation. In order to do that, you have to liberate children. You cannot have in any part of a free society where you have a marginalized group. We cannot get free like that. So that means we have to question not only the position that children are in and not just in what they're capable of, because I want children to be in a world. I want that kid who wants to sleep all day to be able to be protected and sleep all goddamn day. You know what I'm saying? I want that kid who doesn't want to come up with the next great invention or philosophy to be able to be loved, have community, and to be their whole authentic self and be protected to do so. And to explore other options down the line if they want to. That's the society I'm talking about building. And in order to do that, we have to dismantle capitalism, in which makes our bodies commodities and chattel. We have to destroy white supremacy built on the genocidal indoctrination of anti-Blackness that is global, that is in the process of dehumanizing and unmaking every African, no matter where you exist on the continent. We would have to dismantle patriarchy, in which they create a system of hierarchy of power and social control, whether your proximity of being a cis hetero person, and especially a cis hetero man. We have to destroy that system. There cannot be any system of where there is a higher up and a lower, and that, oh, certain people get privileges. It all has to go. And I think when we center children in that, it scares us, because children, because they're on the nexus of so much oppression, we would have to look at our positionality in that proximity to power and be like, well, goddamn, it's easy for me to point out the ways in which I'm oppressed. But then when I have to look at the way in which I become an oppressor and an overseer, and I thought I was a good person, we would have to grapple with, well, what does it mean to be a good person? What does it mean to be a good parent in a white settler colonial state? What does it mean to be liberated and free? And what does that look like? It's a continuation to me of evolution that colonialism stopped a long time ago, which is why this entire system must burn. The next speaker, damn, I really forgot. I want to say it's Mama B. Please go next.
Mm. What a powerful, important conversation. So glad that I came across it. So glad for you guys that are holding this space. My God, everyone should be here. Everyone should be here because I'm learning so much. I'm just expanding my knowledge and I'm thinking new thoughts. So thank you, everyone. we talk about respect, and I think somebody talked about it, that her mother was reading books like Your Child Is Not Your Friend. That is just so sad that we even say that, the child is not your friend, and yet we want to continue to have influence in our child's lives. How do we continue to have influence in our child's life when our children are not comfortable with us? And of course, we're not talking about children being best friends to our children. Our children don't need friends, they have friends, but our children need us. They need to be comfortable with us, right? Because if they're comfortable with us, then they're able to then share what's going on in their lives. And so then we'd be able to have influence in their lives. Of course, if we've done the self-development and the personal growth that we need to have as parents, so we can grow some emotional maturity and have some emotional intelligence. So we are not just doing the easy thing of shutting children down and beating up on them and not listening to them. And so when we talk about respect, because I know it is just it's such a big word that we use as parents. Respect me, you have to respect me. And I look at the parents in on TV or whatever program I'm watching, and they're barking this, "You're not respecting me, you're not respecting me." I'm thinking, look in the mirror, mom. Look in the mirror, dad. Respect is earned. We all know that, and I've tweeted out that your date of birth does not entitle you to respect from a child. Respect does. So model respect to your child. Respect the child first before you expect them to respect you. Be a respectable human being yourself before you expect a child to respect you. You want respect, give respect. And so that whole thing of expecting children to just respect us because of our date of birth, then we wonder why they're not able to leave bad relationships, and somebody can come along and just say and treat them all in any type of way and abuse them, and then say, you have to respect me, you have to submit to me, and all of that stuff, and so we've normalized this toxic parenting, and you see it in the comment sections of videos where a parent is taping, recording a child going through the most difficult times, and they're humiliating a child and humiliating and shaming a child. And then in the comment section, you see those anti-Black voices that are hard at work, talking about, oh yeah, that's why we need single parent, we need the fathers in the home, and that whole dog whistle that we can hear so loudly, because somehow we've been brainwashed into believing that only Black families have single parents in them, and so the doom and gloom that our children from single parent homes. My son is one of those. And I'm sorry, but he grew up to really thrive, and he's a quality man, and he grew up from a single home, and so that is why we should have conversations that push back on this single parent home stuff. Mark you, that said, there is no confusion about what two incomes, that the benefits and the opportunities that two incomes in a home afford a child. There is no confusion about what the benefits of having two emotionally mature parents benefit a child. There's no confusion about that. So this is not that space. This is not the argument I'm making. So no one should come at me about that kind of nonsense. We all understand that. But we're talking about single parent homes can produce children who can thrive, because a child needs one caregiver. One caregiver. I heard my friend Leah, and she holds a space every Thursday at 8 p.m. That's where I am, 8 p.m. Eastern. She holds a space called Trauma Drama Thursdays. Trauma Drama Thursdays. She talks about the kind of neglect that we've been talking about here, the kind of how it is abusive, because many times we think abuse is just when you get beat up, or when you get emotional abuse. But even when you are being neglected emotionally, that is abuse, or that is traumatic, I should say. Traumatic is the word I've been trying to use. Traumatic over time, that's traumatic. So Leah, every Thursday, she talks about those things. So I'd encourage people to check her out. But anyway, so we've normalized these toxic parenting, when we get online even, and you hear these messages, and we know that they are coordinated. We know that divide and conquer. So weaken us and have us fighting against each other, against single parents, fighting against double two-parent homes, and on and on and on. So just to end here, with the fear that we instill fear in our children, and then we expect those children who are afraid of us to be able to come to us and tell us about their lives, so then we can have influence in their lives. It won't happen. If you want your child to fear you, just do not pretend and that your child is going to be able to talk to you, because a child who's not comfortable with you is a child you've lost. And I like what the Black author said. Does your child see you light up or see you smile when they walk into a room? Does your child see you light up, smile when they walk into a room? And I flip it sometimes and I say, does your child smile when you walk into a room? Because a lot of our children don't want to see us in the rooms that they are in, because they don't even smile when when we walk into rooms. So we need to shift our minds and recognize that our children are gifts. Our children are not an appendage or an accessory. They're not proof that we are fertile. Our children are gifts, and if we listen to them, we grow. I always say that children, I may have raised my son, but he grew me, because at some point, and I thank God for this, at some point I recognized, even in my toxicity that I brought into my parenting, because I was raised from a toxic place, a child is to be seen and not heard. I come from that kind of background, right? And so somehow, I don't know how, I stumbled into the knowledge that my son is a gift. And so once you start switching, or you have a shift in your mind that this child here is a gift, it causes you to interact with them in a different way. And I'll end with this. Somebody sent me a thing. I was trying to post it in this chat, but I couldn't. I didn't know. I didn't know how to post it from my phone. So I posted it in my timeline otherwise, because I didn't know how to do this stuff. Anyway, so it says, stop labeling children. So instead of labeling a child as dramatic, instead think they are expressing their needs. Instead of difficult, think critical thinker. And somebody mentioned critical thinking over here. And instead of labeling a child as shy, think observant, because that's what they're doing. They're just being observant. And instead of labeling a child as bossy, think leader. And instead, the last one, instead of labeling a child as defiant, think determined. And so if you think of your child as a gift, you will change the language that you even use and how you look at them. Thank you. I'm done speaking.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking of something that I've heard many people have discussions about, and there is literature on it, about abolishing the family, right? And I think about we talk from a perspective of which we see the nuclear family as being a certain structure that benefits white supremacy and capitalism. We will think outside the realms of two-parent households, the stigma of single moms, and all of that. Instead of living by the colonizers' definitions, we can build community structures and family units that benefit to our liberation, our well-being, and the continued ongoing process of being liberated globally. So I want us to kind of challenge that when we tie it to systems of like slavery, right? Because again, too, it's like when we censor kids and we start, decolonizing our own minds, it's also too so we can give them the tools so that they can build their own theory and practice themselves. Because when a people are allowed, especially an oppressed class, can define themselves, their own material conditions, and ways in which to address it, it will help propel our theory and our thinking even further, right? And expand our minds. And so I guess what I'm saying is that I like when we talk about things like understanding our history, where we come from, systems of oppressions, social constructs, because then it reminds us that we haven't even begun to touch the margins of what a liberated society could look like, but we can make it happen. I'm going to do this for another 30 minutes, and then I'll go ahead and close out the space. I want to make sure I thank everyone who's spoken so far and contributed, for all those who shared the space. I encourage people to go back and listen. People who are listening, just a reminder, there are captions on these spaces, and I think it's the right-hand corner with the 3 dots. If you select that and select captions on, that will also help those who need it. So I'm gonna go to the last 2 hands, so Goddess and then Diamond, and then whoever wants to speak next.
I think Diamond had her hand before me. I'll definitely go after her.
Thank you. Sorry, I've been up and down, but I just wanted to piggyback off a lot of the speakers that have spoken before me. All brilliant, all made impeccable points. Toxic parenting displays the most wicked connection to chattel slavery because it encompasses most of the same tenets. Children are treated and seen as property. No autonomy or independence is encouraged. No questions. No questions to people of authority, no matter how rational it may seem or be or is asked. You darken the child's imagination by blighting their spirit, their will, and their energy to fight. You give them a religion that encompasses oppression and judgment, when religion should be, at all intents and purposes, free will. Anger does not beget violence. Only violence begets more violence. This has been the problem with how a lot of kids become abused, and a lot of them by their own parents. And like I said, I myself have been a victim of my parents. And a lot of times it's, besides just generational, it's poor mental health. As PM mentioned, it's working in the constant global white sellers, racism, in the workplace, coming home, there and, don't have enough money, enough food. So there's a lot of connection between chattel slavery and how we treat our children. And so finding solutions by simply creating healthy boundaries and proper communication with our children can take them from out of the oppressed category into more of a liberated category. I agree with so many people with giving kids autonomy. My children have the right not to talk to me disrespectfully, but they have the right to express their feelings, because everybody's feelings in my home is valid. If you notice, most people would treat their pets better than they'll treat their children, let alone, another human being. They'll see their pets suffering and lose their mind, but see their kids suffering and turn their head. That's a problem. And it's a problem when it happens in our community, because as our host has said, and many of the speakers have said, it sets our children up to be limited when they walk out in the real world without us. And we have to be setting our kids up to be, strong when they come out in this real world by themselves. This is where they lose, or this is when they start repeating what they learn. The last point I have to make is I grew up under that. I don't know about many of you. My mother used to say, do as I say and not as I do. And, that was an example. That was an example of that control. But what is those examples of do what I say and not as I do really set for the youth in their mind? So that was all I have to say just by listening. Thank you all for allowing me to speak. Thank you for this topic. And I hope that we continue this series or this topic, because I think this is only the beginning. Like, this is the top layer. There's deeper and deeper that we can go with discussing this, because like you said, this is a lot of unlearning to do. And just as a parent, I'm not saying I'm ever doing everything right. I have to continue to keep myself in check. As a parent, just like our kids are maturating, as a parent, I have to still continue to make sure that I'm maturating, that I'm growing, that I'm changing, but changing in the right direction as my children, and that we're meeting somewhere. Because, I love my children. I don't want to hurt them. And I also want them ready for the world when I'm no longer here. So thank you again. I'll land right here.
No, I appreciate you, Diamond, for real. And there's one more request. So we have enough time for the last 3 speakers, and I'll try to remember what I was going to say, because Diamond, you said something and I wanted to respond to it. Oh, I remember now. Okay, my fault, y'all. So I was thinking, right, is you were saying about, having this conversation more with each other and expanding our ideas on it. I couldn't agree more. And also too, like, the goal for me, and I don't hide it. My politics is very clear. I want to see Black people free in my lifetime. I believe revolution will come in our lifetime. That takes a decolonization process, and that begins with having a lot of difficult conversations, and then building a theory, and then building praxis, and start changing our material conditions to reflect that evolution, right? So what I'm saying is that as we draw the parallels between chattel slavery, the way we parent and abuse and suppress and oppress children and treat them as property, it should have us look around to look at our jobs, how we get treated by our spouses, how we get treated by the business class, the Black bourgeois class. I mean, every structure start looking at it, because, and not to be dramatic at all, just think it's a fact that we will see slavery has not ended, that we do live in a slave society in the way it's built and its oppressive system, so that we can stop being comfortable and saying that we just need to fix certain things here and there, and then living in a settler colony would be better and comfortable. Absolutely not. If we really want to see a world in which every child and every person and every being has full autonomy to decide for themselves what it means to be human, to define and name themselves, this Western society must fall, and we must have a revolution to free our people. So I'm going to go to Goddess, and then to, I'm so sorry, sis. I'm going to try to pronounce your name, but I want to do it right. Can you tell me Opem? Is that how you say it?
It's Okweyemi.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm so sorry.
It's
And
fine.
then after Say, and then a day will be the last speaker.
Okay, thank you. Awesome space. If we can even just look at the Stop Labeling Children, that chart that Mama B has posted, like, that is what I want to land with, and just what I want to end off with the space and my contribution to this amazing conversation. Millennials are struggling right now. And I think that we're traumatized by the title. We're traumatized from decades and decades of corporal punishment, of authoritative parenting. And now that so many of us have parents, We think gentle parenting means we think gentle parenting means love, and gentle parenting means no discipline. And we don't know how to discipline our kids, and we're terrified. We weren't taught how to discipline. We don't know what it looks like, and because discipline in our capitalist, colonized, white supremacist society means violence, we're stuck. It's terrifying and it's sad to see. So I'm a millennial mama, and I'm watching my baby. I'm watching his friends. I'm watching the school. I think people keep saying it like they're shocked that millennials are even worse parents. They're shocked at the alpha babies. They don't know what's happening. I'm gonna put the pandemic aside, right? We've gone through a public health crisis. We're still even going through that, and that's another aspect of this topic. But I'm talking to millennial parents. If you are a millennial right now and you have a baby, we need to learn how to discipline. And gentle parenting is amazing, right? And when we speak on what gentle parenting was intended to do, it's the autonomy where we just discussed, y'all. It's the agency. It's viewing these children as human beings and having the patience as the adult to be gentle with this human being as they grow. Nowhere in that does it say you're not raising that child. we still have we still got to do the work, y'all. There's a lot of work we still have to do. And I think millennials are traumatized. We are stuck, we are scared, we're burnt out. The list is out of this world. But if you decided to be a parent, if you decided to give life, we still have this responsibility of raising this human being in this terrifying, atrocious, I don't even know what to call the state of the world right now. They need us. And I came up with this, and why I'm ending in this. Shahid, you said something that just reminded me of the trauma that I when I'm speaking with my homies, when I'm speaking with my people, what we're all always saying. If you're as empowered as I am, if you're doing the work that I am, if you're working towards liberation, I notice there's something consistent with all of us. We were all those children Shahid was talking about. We were all those children that would be in this space saying like, none of this is making fucking sense, and having the courage to say this, and adults would be livid with us. I had this. Adults didn't know what the fuck to do with me. I was at home, in school, in events, anywhere an adult brought me. If there were adults there, adults were like, "What the fuck is this kid? Like, who is this?" And it's partly because of my father. Partly, and I'm going to say this. I had a safe space. I had an adult that let me challenge, that said, "Hey, you're a human being." And so I thought all adults would give me that space. And I would notice time and time again, authoritative figures didn't know what to do with me. And I'm saying this because now as a parent, I do not play about the spaces I bring my child into, because he has my exact spirit. Both me and my partner are the same. So the spirit was born into him. This is who he is. And I will never put him in a space with an adult that restricts him, that dehumanizes him. If you're not an adult that is like my father, that is like me, that is like my partner, that are like my homies, you're not seeing my child. You're never going to get to know him, because there's no adult, there's no human being in this world that's going to dehumanize him. And that's what we all deserved. And I can only imagine what we would have done with this world if we were empowered and pushed and allowed to challenge and figure out this world. We were all cut. We were all cut and broken the fuck down. And that's why we're in this space right now. With trauma, trying to figure out this, trying to teach each other and love on each other and heal and unlearn, and then go back and do the work that we were put on this earth to do. That's our purpose. That is why, Shahid, you were that kind of child. That's why you had that spirit. That's why I have this spirit. That's why pen and paper has this spirit. That's why we all have this spirit. That's why we're doing this work. right? And so big up yourself. But now we have children that we need to pour into, allow to bloom. So when they're our age and when they're the adults and it's time for them to contribute, they destroy this world. They dismantle and they rebuild and they dream and they become the adults and and to reach the purpose that they were meant to be. And so I'm asking every single one of you, if you're in this space right now, shout outs to this space, shout outs to everything we learned, shout outs to yourself for sitting here this long and doing this and having this discussion. But please be that safe space for any child you ever come into contact with. Please, like, read what Mama B put up there. Never label a child be a safe space. Please, because they're brilliant. These kids, these children, and I'm saying this because now that my child doesn't have those restrictions and the things he says, the things he does, the 5-year-old that I'm watching, I'm in awe. I cannot believe children can be this brilliant. Children can do what he's doing. And I'm only excited to see what else he's going to do. And so he deserves that. Every single child that we bring into this earth deserves that. So please be that adult to foster that space for that child because they deserve that. And pen and paper, baby girl, I said you're a thought leader. Thank you for this space. All of us are thought leaders, and shout outs to all of us, and big up yourself for sitting here and discussing and doing the work you're doing. And thank you for the space. Thank y'all. I'm in such a great mood. You guys have brightened my day. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I feel you. And I'm so glad you got to come and we got to share space together again. It's been a minute. I really enjoyed everything you brought up, the way you made us think and challenge, your history on pre-colonial treatment of children, having us to see that not only is it possible, but we've done it before. Thank you, for real. The next person,
It's
yes.
okay.
Mhm.
Hi. So I know for people who are not from Nigeria, the OP sounds like OKP. Maybe that would help with
That
pronunciation.
does. Yo, thank you.
Yeah. So it's like a silent K in there before the P before the P. Ah, oh wow. Okay. This has been a day, really. Um all that we've been talking about, really, it's taking me back to okay. So talking about what came to my mind is like the perspective, our perception of time, where they say like uh 5 years could feel like a week, and then a week feels like forever, right? Because as a millennia, all these things that happened right now, it's feeling like, oh, I was just in this, I was just going through this, like, n- just a while ago. I guess the body keeps scores, like they say. But I echo what Goddess says. Millennials are struggling, and I cannot imagine what it feels like for the generation that raised us and are reaping the sour fruit of toxic parenting with estranged and no contact children. However, the good news is our generation, we still have the opportunity to do it right. The notion, I think Mama B brought this up, the notion that your child is not your friend, it's just an oxymoron at its core, at its basic level, because if you are that child's first of everything and their window into the world, that makes you the first model friend they have. And how are they even going to make friends when hostility is what is modeled to them, or when violence is what is modeled to them? How are they supposed to survive and thrive when the first of everything that they saw is shitty, pardon my French. Spanking and submission at its core, I think, as we've all been saying, is the belief that children are subhuman. The same way, going back to beating children is the legacy of chattel slavery, is that they are subhuman, they are property. And it is an erasure of their humanity, suppresses their emotion and personality, and to build compliant individuals. But as we're saying, the opposite is the effect, because we perpetuate the cycle of violence and raise people that are unable to self-regulate, and we churn out adults, because if you're seeing them as property or things, then we're like literally churning out products, adults who cannot self-regulate, but want children to self-regulate and then punish them for not being able to. What really what I'm struck by today, or what is hitting on for me in all these hours we've spent here, is that what we're doing here today, as amazing and mind-blowing as all of this is, it won't be productive unless we are committed to a grassroots dismantling, or at least a deconstruction of these beliefs and notions. And when I mean this construction, because I think everybody here, that if I want to believe that everybody here, if you're not already committed to, oh, this is spanking children is wrong, you have an open mind to learning about why it is not right. So basically, we're preaching to half the choir at this point, and we need to reach somebody, at least one person. I think that's how we're going to be productive with this conversation. Find somebody, because I want to believe we know at least someone who is still entrenched in this belief of, I'm the parent, whatever I say goes, and we're still perpetuating this. And I think that's how we'll be more successful with this, and slowly through compassionate interaction, help them see that there is a better way to discontinuing this cycle. I have a friend who became a sister, and through her, I have an amazing niece and nephew. It's been a journey to letting them do life on their own terms. I mean, this sister friend is also a Nigerian, had kids, are first generation Americans, and the struggle is real for, especially for her, their mom, when your kids are just like, Mom, stop yelling at me. I mean, if you know a typical Nigerian household, you tell your mother to stop yelling at you, you're dead. Like, really. But she'll be like, look at this kid telling me to stop yelling at her. But we're getting there with, okay, when your kid tells you something, they are an individual, they are their own person, they are human, fully human, with their personality and everything there. You need to listen to them. And it's been a journey letting them do life on their own terms, in cooperation with their own with their parents. But they have also provided me a restorative avenue, I mean, for my own journey also, with dealing with trauma from my past, because it's like, okay, as I'm going through therapy, I am also learning to undo things that have been done to me by not doing it to these kids that have been blessed to be part of their lives. When I met my partner, I only had one request. I was like, do not yell at me. If you ever raise your voice at me, this relationship is over. And he knew I was serious because it was one of the things like that still scares me. I cannot stand anybody who yells. Like, because as a kid, when the yelling starts, I just go hide somewhere. And I'm like, now that I'm an adult, I don't have to accept that as a kid I had no choice. But as an adult, I can choose whether to put up with that or not. So I will close with something that I found out when I was doing my research back to pre-colonial um, African society that have been brought up a few times during this space. I found out in pre-colonial Yoruba society, and it was something that happened one time. I was like 5 or 6 when I had the rare privilege of staying at my grandma's. When a kid is fussy, I think it was Saeed that brought up like a communal society. Yes, that was how it was. The village raises the child. When a kid is fussy, for lack of better word, like when you're really becoming a pain in the ass of your parent, your mother, there's something Yoruba people call arodon. I don't well, the English translation would be, it's basically something that doesn't exist. It's like um an idiom sort of. Your mom would tell you to go to the next house, to go next door and collect arudon for her and be like, hey, can you go to Mama Rose's house and tell her to give you arudon? And the child will go over there and say, hey, my mom says I should collect arudon. And Mama Rose will be like, oh, I actually just gave it to Mama B. She lives 2 doors down. Go there, she'll give it to you. And then the child will walk 2 doors down and Mama B will say, oh, didn't Mama Rose tell you? I gave it back to her the other day. And this woman will pass the kid, will make the kid walk around all these households for like 5 or 10 minutes. And what they were doing is they just letting, so this is a kid typically who is like sugar high and cannot sit still. And because the mother would not want to like maybe discipline the child or hit they don't hit. So it was a way of like communally dealing with a child that is this day will be considered unruly. They go around and then maybe after the child gets to goddess's house, and goddess will be like, how many places have you been to? And then the child names the places he's gone to. Goddess will determine, okay, this child by now should be tired. And say, okay, I'll go with you to your mom to explain where the Arodon is. And Goddess will take this child back home and say, hey, Mama John, John is back. So can I talk to you about the Arodon? Is actually with me. I'm using it right now. And the mom would thank Goddess, and that's the end. And this child had just burned the energy that is making them just jump about the house and wearing the mother down. And that's how the work of childcare and supporting each other is done. In ancient Yoruba culture, it's one of the ways it's done. Instead of the mother being like, I am really tired, you're getting on my nerves, yell at the child or hit the child. That's how it's done. Or other times, you might get to Goddess' house. Goddess will be like, oh, go play with my kids, and that's it. And after and send a word to the mom and be like, oh, your kid is with me. And that's how they supported each other. So the community also really matters when we're talking about this, because part of what the white supremacist does is isolate, and with isolation it does something to your brain and all of that. So if we can find communities again and also recognize that there is work to be done here, especially as millennials, I think we can do this. I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And, I'll just quickly say, like, as you were talking, I was thinking about when we have these types of discussions with people around us, on and off the app, of course. But then we start like thinking of other things. Okay, well, how do we be able to protect, each other as well as young people and children to be able to maintain that autonomy? Because the reality then becomes we do live in a violent state that seeks to constantly repress. And when we send them to school, we know what we're sending them to. Whole ass training, Comprador training camps, basically, but brainwash camps in which they're violently broken there, if not at home. And so it makes us think, okay, well, how do we think of the strategies? And that's why I compare it and say how it comes from chattel slavery, because even in slavery, these are the questions that our ancestors had to ask in order to plan like escape and to plan burning down plantations or just chopping off a cracker's head, right? They're like, okay, those of us who choose to revolt, we've also taught our kids the need to revolt. So we're planning this escape or we're planning to burn down this plantation. How will we do that? Keep our kids safe while we plan to do that, while we get from point A to point B. Because we know if I teach my kid to be autonomous and then I send them out into the plantation or I send them out into the world has every mechanism in place that is very violent, that will break and bend them if we don't, and then break and bend us if we don't break and bend them. You brought up so many interesting points. So now I'm rambling, but I hope when people listen back to this, and I hope people do, it's just going to give me so much more to think and write about and to expand my mind on. So thank you. I'm going to do just 3 more speakers and then we'll end the space. So we'll go with Say and then a day B and then the last speaker.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I just wanted to add on. I forgot to say this when I spoke. A lot of times we talk about generational curses, and just the term has never sat well with me. But I just read the other day someone said there's we have to let go of that because words mean things, and when we're saying those things, you're literally cursing yourself. But it's not so much a generational curse. It's just you watch what your parents did and they watch what their parents did, and so on and so on. And so yes, now that you are aware of that, it's up to you. You can change that. It doesn't have to be a curse. It's just simply changing your frame of mind, which is what I've got from today, with this whole experience and this listening to everyone speak. It's just as simple as changing the way you think, and it can be done. It's not impossible. It's not a curse. It's not something that you have to pray away or perform any spells to get rid of. It's just simply changing the way that you interact with yourself and your children. But that was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
No, thank you. And like when I think of it though, too, it's like because I in resisting like demonizing certain practices, especially African practices, right? As far as like indigenous practices of spirituality and things of that nature. I hate the way in which colonialism has like hijacked our language and therefore our imagination to where we think of like, oh, addressing a very real material condition is somehow like spooky or dead work or something that, we should fear. And yeah, when you said that, that made me think of that. But we'll go with a day, and then the last speaker. And before that, I want to remind people that you're sharing a space with so many incredible people and minds and perspectives. I hope y'all follow each other. And I hope that y'all be encouraged to have spaces on your own and talk about these subjects and others. There's a lot going on in this world. And I know it can be confusing because we weren't taught history in a way that would liberate us or help us understand our conditions. But we can struggle forward with that. And that takes a willingness to challenge ourselves and each other, hold each other accountable for our biases and our prejudices, and then willing to dream of something bigger. So with that, we'll go with a day, and then the last speaker, and then I'll end the space.
Thank you. It's a fantastic space. I'm a person that's in spaces. People will see me around in different spaces. It's good to have one that's so positive and sensitive in a way, with our people, not shouting at, cursing at each other and stuff like that. It's very important that we talk about issues that affect us in a way that can, people feel free to talk about things that are very sensitive. So thank you for people putting all this stuff and listening to it. It's a fantastic kind of thing. I think this is what social media should be used for us as a people to, express ourselves in ways that we feel comfortable with, and talk about issues like this. I think social media can be a very powerful thing, though it's used, sometimes I think it's used even against us to, create confusion and misinformation. So it's really, really good. And like Penn said, and other people, follow each other, follow people that you want to hear more from and stuff. I think it's building those kinds of links using these kind of technologies is the way kind of forward. Definitely. And I think, yeah, it is a legacy of colonialism and slavery directly. I think it's something that, I think you live in Western systems. It's something you don't necessarily get over. It's just there lingering in the background. And the way we deal with our children, it is there. But personally, I'm a parent myself. I think I try to, I read a lot of my history. I read a lot of people's histories around the world. I try to understand the world. So I do try to, tell my children about how things are in a soft way, but I don't necessarily want to repeat the mistakes that, I've seen my parents make in relation to, punishment and things like that. They were a bit harsh, had traditional Nigerian parents, which are a bit difficult sometimes. But, I think I've learned some good things from them and some bad things from them as well. But, you do try and push things forward. But like I say, it's a fantastic space, So my last question is, when we're going to kind of do this thing again, Pen, maybe it'd be a good idea to create another space like this so that we can have maybe a part two and expand on things further. And yeah, everyone have a good one. That's me.
No, I appreciate your day. And we've been following each other a long time. So I'm glad we got to be in space again. It's been a while. But as far as a part two to this space, I'm not going to lie to y'all. I'm not probably going to do one, but I think that's a good thing. Because what I definitely don't want to do is create spaces in which we go to a go-to person or an individual that everyone just clamors to listen to. Like everyone's contribution is matters. So that's why I encourage y'all to open your own spaces and create these ideas. And when we go about creating these spaces, to also think of ways of not like implementing like hierarchies or parasocial relationships. So it's good that I can leave it here because everyone here is so capable to contribute and do their own spaces, and we can follow each other and support each other in that. I know Goddess is going to have some things coming up. So again, follow her, and then again, follow each other. So with that, we got one more speaker, and then we'll end the space. And just real quick, thank everyone for coming and also sharing the space. Like I said, I've learned a lot, and I can't wait to like re-listen to this. Y'all are all amazing. Go ahead, the last speaker.
Hello everyone. When I saw this, the topic, I was like, and hello, Mama B. that thing where you follow amazing people and you also get to see amazing stuff going on, and then you get to join in, and that's how I found myself here. How common parenting practices are modeled after chattel slavery. That sounds like a very painful subject that you know it takes courage for parents of millennials to even want to talk about it, and I'm sure that I'm going to have to listen to the recording to take notes and all. And I'm sure that Black people from the diaspora, America and all, they probably already talked about their own what they experienced as this is concerned. And I think one of it is probably um, police, we call it police brutality. I don't know whether that's what you call it in America, but I guess it's more or less the same thing. We call it police brutality in Nigeria, and where you know you're not exactly sure. It doesn't really matter. When I hear some Black people say things like, oh, if you behave yourself, no one would arrest you, I'm like, I like you want to you can't slap them because that would be your phone. So yeah, because you're like, how can you just open your mouth and say something like that? It's not about how you behave, it's about the mood of the officer. And I've heard, which began to make a lot of sense, I have heard that the foundation, and that is really important, we need to look at the foundation of things. We need to trace things back, right? Okay, like, where does this really start from? And I learned that the foundation of policing was to hunt down slaves. So of course, why would we expect that policing anywhere in the world, not just America, anywhere in the world, would favor Black people for any reason? It wouldn't. So and you find that parents, and I brought that up because at the end of the day, you want your children safe, right? And so you find parents, having to teach their children how to practically, like, calm a wild person down, more or less like when you're going on an adventure in the woods and you stumble on a bear or something, and running is just a bad idea at that point in time. So you now have to, God, God willing, how to back away from a bear or something to not trigger it to run after you or something like that. That is exactly how, Black children are taught about policing, right? And how to interact with police officers and, uniformed people, generally speaking. And away from that, because that right there is something to ponder on. But I want to look at things from this angle as well, in the sense that it's very important as parents. I think we should stop expecting schools to teach our children what they need to know. So two things: you either homeschool your children at this point, or you homeschool them, actually. I mean, there's something called what they call informal education. I don't even know why they said informal. It is the education, as far as I'm concerned, because that is really what you need to know to stand up for yourself in public. Because when knowledge is power at the end of the day. At least that's the beginning of how you begin to think about how to get power and how to take your power back. And you notice that when it comes to the issue of slavery, invasion, and all of that, it had to do with psychology. Like, you look at everything, it's like we're psychologically, the psychology is very deep. It's not so straightforward. And so if you don't delve into the psychology of the whole thing, it becomes very complex. And we also have to look at the spiritual side of things here. I nobody can convince me that there wasn't some spiritual exchange somehow that made it possible for what happened with slavery and how slavery came about, how it happened. There is a lot that happened there. And we really need to be spiritually intelligent to really decipher these things. And I suggest that as parents, or parents to be, or communal parents, that word just dropped into my mind this afternoon, communal parents, that we teach our children history, starting from our own family's history. then you expand it to pre-colonial history. That is really important. Like, we can decide not to, like, it's fine if we don't teach our children about slavery yet. I think that may be counterproductive. We should start from the beginning. Who were we before some people thought it was a good idea to slice Africa like a cake or something? Like, who were we then? Look at the history of people, what they did, what they invented, and you see people actually churning out content on social media, and you see these things, you're like, wow, we did that. Wow, we did this. We were that. Oh my goodness, we invented that one. Wow, I didn't know that. So it should be a learning process, both for parents and children, where we learn history. And sometimes we have to give assignments to children as well, like, look at this country, especially countries where they are predominantly what one person called dark, richly hued people. I like that word more than black. Richly hued people. What their history is, study it, what caused their downfall. What do you think? Like, engage the minds of these children. Like, what do you think happened? Why do you think it happened? And you'll be surprised at the things you hear. But I would round up by saying this, that in all the teaching that we teach our children, and I started with policing for a reason, that policing issue, I started it for a reason. There is teaching your child to be intelligent, but it's also important to teach your child to be wise as well. And so we have a long way to go in terms of who we want to become in the future. And so it would not do us any good to be confrontational about people that are already triggered anytime they see a richly hued skinned person. They feel threatened already. So it's best to keep your thoughts to yourself when they are around or where they are concerned. You don't want them knowing, you don't want them. There's this saying, and it made a lot of sense because I like to talk. So I like to learn how not to say things I ought to keep to myself. There are some things that should be for your ears only. There are some things that should be for your eyes only. You don't go around letting people know how much you know. And that quote, I always try to remind myself of, I believe it was by Shakespeare, that it says, have more than thou showest, no more than thou, I can't remember the second one, but it's like, the explanation of that one was, don't let people know how much you know. Don't let people be aware of how much you know, because anyone who knows a lot, we know that they become endangered species one way or the other, and it doesn't do well for us to know that. I don't know whether I'll quite misty here, but there's this saying in Southwest Nigeria where they say, when your hand has not touched the sword of vengeance, you do not ask for the death that killed your ancestors. So you must make sure that you are armed psychologically, spiritually, especially. Those two are where our weapons of defense, our weapons of recovery and restoration, where they lie: psychology and the spiritual. And as a Christian, I'm taught that the Bible is a warfare book. And you read it, you read about wars and all of that, you understand, I didn't think one could do something like that. That's interesting. Like, when you read the scripture like that, it shows me a lot of things, how to fight and how not to fight.
And
So
real
yeah.
quick,
So
ma'am, just land your plane, please.
um I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
If you could land your plane, please, like get to your grounding argument, and then after you go, I'm gonna go ahead and close this space. So if you're coming to a close with your point, and then we're gonna end at you.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry I even took this long. I apologize for that. I'll just say thank you for this space, and I'll just mute the mic for now.
Appreciate it. So I'm going to say that a day you were right. These does need to follow the space. I'm so firm that I'm not going to be the one to do it. I know others are going to take up that mantle and should, because there's so much more we need to push towards this, right? Like even when we think about how we treat our children, I want us to focus on the present, like where we are, not just in our household, but in the world, right? So you live in a world where, food prices are going up. More and more people are unemployed with no job. The police are killing people left and right and building cop cities in America to imprison more people just in case y'all rise up. Across the globe, you have imperialism in which they're destabilizing economies in order so that the people become so desperate that they will open up the markets to foreign corporations so that those people can be exploited and destroy their land, drinking water, and air. And that no matter who sits in the position of power and empire, that this would be the function of it. And when we think of things in these terms, and what I'm trying to challenge people on to do, is that we then think of things in a more applicable and like realistic way, right? So when we talk about giving our kids autonomy, what does it mean like in that context? Like I said, the kids are going to choose and analyze their material conditions regardless. Some of them are going to be reactionary, some of them are going to be revolutionary, some of them are going to be, conservative, whatever. But there's always going to be a resistance and an uprising where there is oppression. So the youth already, from what I'm paying attention to, have already started pockets of resistance. So us telling them to keep their head down, don't piss off the state, even though the state is there to capture them anyway, regardless of how they act. Again, to me, that is still the same conditioning, whether we do it in a soft tone, whether we listen to them as they talk back and then tell them to still keep their head down. Isn't that still breaking their will? Because if we all agree that we live in an oppressive global system in which we are not liberated, and we talk about our kids being their full autonomous self, wouldn't it be a possibility that once they get their autonomy or feel enough safe to speak, that they'll say, hey, why haven't y'all torn this shit down yet? There is no future if we continue like this. Are we going to tell them to be quiet and behave and not look at police and all the exact, I just want us to think about this more deeper, because the things that we're saying that are going to happen or already have happened and are the reality for those at the bottom. And we're seeing it rise to those who thought they were safe and have proximity to power now starting to feel it. So you're going to see more changes in current events. You're going to see more misinformation campaigns. You're going to see more people around you that you grew up with be reactionary. And in that context, what does it mean to challenge the parenting practices? And what does it mean as a community when we impose certain will on children? Are we imposing them? Are we encouraging them to be free and liberated by any means necessary? Or are we saying you can be free only up to a certain point? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the space. I thank everyone for coming. Please continue to follow each other and talk to each other and also have these difficult discussions. All right, so I always end my spaces the same. All power to the people. And let's get free.